All right, again, thank you guys for joining in. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. As you are filing in, feel free to drop where you're coming from, city, state, maybe practice name in the chat. Welcome, Dr. Wells. Welcome, Ruby. Great to have you here. Welcome, George. Good to have you. Okay, as you folks are dialing in, if you could just say hello in the chat where you're coming in from. And if you have a question about vision insurance, feel free to throw that into the chat as well. Welcome, Natalie. Welcome, Brittany. Welcome, Jenna. We'll get rolling in just 1 minute here. Doc, I really want to pronounce your last name, but I don't want to mispronounce it. So, welcome, Dr. Heidi. Welcome, Dr. Shoffley. Thank you. That's so helpful. Okay, as folks are dialing in, I'll get started with a little bit of an introduction and what the format of tonight's webinar is going to be, and then invite you guys to ask questions as they come up. My name's Steve Alexander. I'm head of growth here at Anagram. Part of my role is to help communicate about who we are and what we do. Part of my role is to help educate the industry about some of the stuff that we handle. So, Anagram has been around in eye care for going on 10 years now. And over the course of those 10 years, we've developed a series of products and tools to help make the whole insurance process hopefully easier, from in or out of network vision plan eligibility and claim submission to now our full service suite of revenue cycle management tools and services. We've got a couple of folks from Anagram in there who can answer your text questions as well if I can't get to them during the presentation. If you throw a conversation into chat, they can handle that. If you throw something into the Q&A, I will answer it as the questions arise. But I do have some questions that were asked in the run up to the meeting. So I'll start with those, and maybe that'll inspire some questions in the audience, and more people will file in, hopefully continue to ask questions. But before I dive in, just thank you again for your attendance and your interest in the topics that we're going to cover here. And off we go. So one of the questions we got was, when I make the switch to becoming an out-of-network provider, how do I effectively communicate that to my patients without scaring them away? I think it's a pretty common question that we are faced with at Anagram, and one of the best ways to do that is to plan out your communication, to be deliberate about what you want to say to your patients and why you're making the change, though that, of course, necessitates that you've got an understanding of why you're making that change and kind of the parts of that decision-making process that make the most sense to your patients and customers. If you give your customers or prospects a reason that, we can't be profitable, they may or may not relate to that and appreciate that as an answer. But if it is equally true that vision plan credentialing or being in network with a vision plan can sometimes lower the quality of service you can provide, or increase the wait times of the work that's manufactured, or create complexities where they don't belong, or otherwise limit your options as the practice owner. Those are all things that you can say to them. Those are all things that practices have communicated effectively. When you're talking to Anagram folks, we've got a litany of practice websites that list precisely this kind of thing and have that conversation regularly, asynchronously on websites or through email communication, or when the patients call the practice. We also have scripting guidelines and toolkits that you can use to develop your messaging around that. And I think there's more than how to communicate that. There's a question around whether or not patients will be scared away from it. And there's a subset of your patients that if you do drop a vision plan and you have that conversation with them, you may in fact scare some of them away. But typically what we see is the ones that don't come back to your practice after you've made this decision and after you've communicated it well are those same patients that come into your practice today and say something like, I only want what's covered by my plan. And I don't mean to cast aspersions at those patients. They have their understanding of their vision plan and they want to leverage it the way that they want to leverage it. But you know as well as I do that those patients are unfortunately not a profitable patient for your business. I try to be pretty careful about not lowering a patient just to a revenue figure. But the material fact is, if your practice is not profitable, or if the profitability suffers in the long term, you'll be able to see fewer and fewer patients and then eventually zero. But the patients that think about you as their healthcare provider and understand the communication that you provide to them, they will come back. And because your business will be slightly less busy, you'll be able to provide a higher level of care and they will be even more loyal than they are currently. And we've seen this happen time and time again. The typical process for practice dropping a vision plan is that in the first year that they drop that plan, they will lose a small proportion of their patients, somewhere between 30 and 50% of their patients. I know it's a wide range, but that range depends on how many of those just want what's covered patients are currently coming into your office. But then we also see in the following years that about half of the patients that you lost come back again because they didn't like the service they got elsewhere. Now, I know these are pie in the sky figures, but we've seen it over and over again. I've personally consulted hundreds of practices in doing this, and some folks on the Anagram team are in the dozens of successful pet practices that have done this. So keep in mind, we've built a toolkit to let you do this in an effective way, and only when it's right. Also, I don't want to sit here and say drop every vision plan right now. If there's a vision plan that you're thinking about stepping away from, we can walk you through how to do the math to identify whether or not it's right. I'm not looking to help a practice make a bad decision. This only makes sense if, in fact, it makes sense. And we are both cognizant of and sensitive to that. How many practices are currently using your service and have become ongoing users at Anagram for the open access side, for our software side? We've got several thousand practices that use our out of network eligibility verification tool every month. Our churn rate is really low. We've done a good job of communicating to our users that the software does what we say, but we've also been really careful to discuss with them that the software can only do what it does if your team is able to communicate to your patients about what out of network or open access benefits are, and you're able to convert those phone calls to patients. And again, we've got tools to help you identify those things and have those conversations. We have a scripting guideline, we have infographics, we've got videos, we've got tons of articles on Spyglass blog. We actually recently launched a podcast called Best Practices, where more of those things are going to come through. And we are also always looking for feedback. If there are things that we don't have that you'd like us to have, throw it into the chat. Shoot me an email, steve@anagram.care. I'm always open to those things. And, sometimes a really great idea will come from somebody who's not ready, but they'll say, like, I'm not ready because I'm missing this bit of information or this tool. And we are more than happy to build that. And it's important that we build that. Actually, all of our tools have been made better in partnership with our customers. And this is how we continuously improve. Now, other questions. If you inform a vision plan that you're going to drop, what is the typical timeline? It varies from plan to plan. It's typically somewhere between 30 and 90 days. Often, when you inform a vision plan, and it's going to depend on where you are geographically and how much penetration this vision plan has in your neck of the woods. But if you inform them that you'd like to step away from the plan and you want to abide by the agreement that you signed and it has a 90-day period, they will often abide by that 90-day period and keep you on panel until that expires. But it is just as common for the vision plan to respond by dropping you from their panel as soon as they receive the letter. Now, you've got to be prepared either way. And in our ebook, Accessing Utopia, it talks you through the process of what you should have ready before you send that letter and what you should be ready to do once you've sent it. There are lots of implications to stepping away from that vision plan. Lots of things like the communication that we talked about a little bit earlier, but certainly your pricing, your products, your lab relationships, all of those things have to be lined up appropriately to get you to do this successfully. Now, there are also things you can do to optimize when you're in network. A lot of it involves understanding the agreement that you signed and how it relates to the state that you're in. There are lots of states where you are able to opt out of the lab network, where you can stay in network with a vision plan, but use your own lab to provide the lenses, to fulfill the lenses for your patients. And this gives you an opportunity to take back control of your supply chain, change your reliance on the network labs if that's something you've run into issue with, but also gives you a little bit more control over the products that you dispense and a chance to be a little bit more profitable. You can reduce your costs. A lot of that will certainly have to do with how your lab relationships are currently structured. Quick question for the audience. Are there any people in the audience who are currently opted out in network but using their own labs? And drop a note in the chat if you can. While you guys are doing that, I'm going to open a poll. And there are 5 questions in this poll, hopefully fairly easy to answer. Okay, your services and materials. Got it. Okay. In this poll, a couple of vision insurance related questions, just useful for us to understand where people's sentiments are and how they might want to take the next step. Another question we received, where do you see vision insurance going in 3 to 5 years? Is it evolving in favor of the practice or the insurance provider? I think it's an important question. Now, a little background on me for those who I haven't spoke with or haven't seen me deliver lectures before. I've been in eye care for almost 25 years now. I started as an optician when I was 16 and have been in the industry kind of nonstop ever since. When I first started, I was at a Pearl Vision in Buffalo Grove, Illinois, and we were in network with iMed. And I distinctly remember the first paycheck that I received from that job I used to get an oil change. That oil change cost me $18. It was 2001. It cost me $18. I was in network with iMed, and a reimbursement for an eye exam then was in total, including the patient copay, was $40. Smash cut to 2025. An oil change is somewhere in the range of $80 to $120. And that's for like a standard oil change, and synthetic is even more than that. But any guesses what a reimbursement for an iMed eye exam is today? It's about $40. So if in the last 24 years there's been no significant increase in the reimbursement for the second biggest vision plan, which is a subsidiary of the largest lens and frame manufacturer in the world, I don't see a reason that the vision plans will change their mode of operations. Like, why would they increase their reimbursements all of a sudden where their network is as strong as it's ever been? And sometimes stronger. Certainly, EssilorLuxottica has done quite a bit in the way of acquisition. They've got thousands of locations across the US, and VSP, similarly, they've acquired VisionWorks and iMart Express recently, I believe. They've both have private equity investments in mom and pop shops. So they are very, in a very real way, competing in your backyard and also a vision insurance provider for you. If there's enough of a critical mass of ODs that recognize where this is headed and maybe make a more deliberate decision to not be in network with as many vision plans or specialize more such that they're less reliant on the vision plans and are able to do more specialty care or private pay business or cash pay business, then maybe the vision plans will have to react. If the industry continues down the path that it's been on, I don't see a reason they would change their processes in a way that's favorable to the private practitioner, because I don't really see that they have an incentive to do so. If anything, my guess is based on how vertical integration has gone and how there's more acquisitions all the time and across all the facets of the industry. It's not just mom and pop businesses or practices that they're buying. It's software companies and lens companies. Essilor just invested into audiology. And that's not a dig on the investment. I mean, it makes sense from their standpoint, but it doesn't seem to me like they are as invested in your success. And as long as that continues to be true, I don't see why they would improve your reimbursements. I don't think that they have any impetus to do so. Got a note from a guest. I'm just going to read it because I think it's important. We'll never get a reasonable reimbursement as long as we, as individual providers, continue to bend over and take it from them. It's time to turn that red hot poker on the insurance companies. It's an atrocity that we can't bind together as independent professionals, form a union, and negotiate for better reimbursements. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. As long as I've been in the industry, a lot of the common wisdom, a lot of the knowledge in the industry has said, be independent, stay independent. Nobody knows your practice quite like you do, and feel it out for yourself and figure it out. But I think to your point, and to something that we ought to have recognized a while ago, there is strength in numbers. If a large enough quantity of doctors or practices, even in a limited geographic territory, decided to together step away, then that would have a big impact and likely a ripple effect on the rest of the industry. There's no guarantee of that, certainly, but I think working together to make these kinds of decisions is important. And I would also say there's been a significant uptick in legislative efforts from AOA. And I don't know if the docs that are in here are AOA members or if they're supporting it, but pay attention to what AOA is up to. There are a couple of lawsuits going through several states. There are a couple of lawsuits that recently were won by the plaintiffs against vision plans in Texas, in Illinois, in Ohio. There's a lawsuit going through in California. And a lot of those, the AOA and their legislative arm, have helped to formulate, have helped to fund, have helped to develop. So, there is a lot to be said for uniting. Now, I know this industry is littered with, alliances and buying groups and so on, but those alliances often are for the purposes of group purchasing. They don't really do any kind of legislation and they don't really do any kind of policy setting. And I know there's limits to what we can do with like monopoly laws and price setting and all of that stuff. So you do have to be careful about how you collaborate. But the idea of a group of doctors making some decisions together about how they want to serve their patients is really important. A friend of Anagram, Dr. Stephen Wilson out of Georgia, sued Spectera a few years ago. He sued Spectera because their lab limitations he saw, and the courts agreed with him, as a limit on his license to practice medicine. And that lawsuit and ruling is the basis for opt out across all of the states. And it was one guy who knew this was wrong and, committed to fighting that fight, and he won. If we were able to do that across the industry, we can make a change. And look, I'm not saying that vision plans have to be detrimental to your business. I'm saying that currently they are. And if we can make an effort to make the reimbursements more reasonable and the service we can provide to patients just as good as a private pay situation, then I'd have no complaints about it. But as it currently stands, the vision plans are making record profits. And despite decades of lawsuits to fight for nonprofit status, practice reimbursements have stayed stagnant for decades, and patient benefits have gone up in the way of discounts, but they haven't really netted for a positive benefit. Not only does it necessitate that practices sell a higher end, more expensive product at a higher rate that maybe that doesn't benefit the patient every time, but in order to stay profitable, that's what the practice has to do. It ends up leaving patients with this perception that private practice is just absurdly expensive. If you go into your dispensary right now and you look at your least expensive frame, if your least expensive frame is $200 and your least expensive progressive lens is $300, which pretty common kind of middle of the road pricing, that means if a patient wants to buy a pair of progressives at your practice at retail price, you're going to quote them about $500. And when the patient has in mind that they can go online to Warby or Zenni or whatever and pay as little as $9 for a pair of glasses, they're not going to know that they can't get a progressive for that, but they know that a $9 pair of glasses is possible. Odds are they're going to step away. Contributing factor here, the economics of your average American consumer, they can't afford a $500 emergency, to say nothing of a $500 elective purchase. Not to say that glasses are elective, but there are options that they can exercise that don't necessarily include your practice. There's some great conversation happening in the chat as well. Dr. Fenimore is talking about starting when I started in the late 80s, plans offered were a flat amount of coverage for patients between 150 and 225, and the patient could shop around and find the best value, which was how it was designed. But the percent discount plans are so varied that it takes extra time for staff to explain to patients. Absolutely right. This is something that is often missed in this conversation, even if we set aside the discounts and the stagnant reimbursements and the lab work that is up and down depending on where you are. It is so much more complex for your staff to deliver this information in a way that the patient can understand. Even when we're talking about a private pay transaction, we got to remember, everybody here, we know about lens materials and coatings and treatments and how prescriptions affect the way lenses look and how frame selection affects all of that. Our patients don't know any of that. So there's a big learning curve for them to understand what we're talking about anyway. Add a layer of these discount plans that they have that they don't understand, but their insurance company says to them, you get free glasses and you're ice skating uphill, as it were. I think it's really important that we have this conversation. I think there's a lot of people who can benefit from understanding all of that context. It's important, it's valuable. The other thing that we wrestle with, and Sal from Team Anagram in the chat will tell you, a lot of the practices that we talk to desperately want to do this, but are afraid of what'll happen when they try. They're afraid of being unsuccessful. A really common thing that we hear is, if I drop this vision plan, I'll never see those patients again. And to reiterate, sometimes that's going to be true. There are going to be some number of patients that you step away from their vision plan and they're going to go somewhere else. And maybe they'll come back in a year or two, but they're at least going to go somewhere else initially. There is a large proportion of patients, though, that will stay with you if you explain it to them in a way that they can understand, and if you can make it easy for them to leverage their benefits anyway. Another element of this conversation that often gets lost is that patients want something that's easy. Really common refrain I also hear is that if I'm out of network with this plan, I'll give the patient an itemized receipt and tell them to fill out a form and then they'll take care of it themselves. But the truth is, filling out a CMS 1500 form is difficult if you don't know what you're doing and patients don't know what they're doing. They're going to make a mistake, they're going to mail it in, and their claim is going to get denied. And they're never going to tell you that their claim got denied, but they're not going to come back again because they don't want to go through that process. If, on the other hand, there was a software that could make it very easy for you to both identify their out-of-network benefits and file the out-of-network claim digitally and make the patient's life really simple, then they're more likely to stay. It's not a guarantee. You're not going to keep all of them, but you're going to keep a large proportion of that. We've been Anagram for 6 years now, I believe, and have made tons of improvements on the software in those 6 years. So when we first launched as Patch, all we could do is out of network eligibility, and it was kind of hit and miss. In the intervening 6 years, we've added in-network eligibility verification and claim submission, as well as an RCM toolkit and a tool we call Universal Search, which is super cool. When I was in practice as an optician, a really common phone call I would get or conversation that I'd get into would be like, hey, I have a vision plan. Can you tell me what it is? It put me in this kind of rough situation. Either I go to every vision plan portal and hope I find this patient, which can take 30 or 40 minutes, or I tell the patient, hey, call your insurance company, find out the name of your vision plan, and then call me back, and then I'll search for it. And both of those options are kind of crummy. But with Universal Search, all you need is first name, last name, and date of birth, and we will look at every single vision plan all at once. Now, we knew that when launching this, how cool it was to save you guys that time. But what we didn't know is how frequently we would find multiple plans. Like patient will come in, as an example, if a patient calls your practice and says, I have VSP, you go and search for them, you find them in VSP, you're not going to keep looking. Why would you keep looking? You found them. But with the software, we will keep looking. So even if they have VSP and they have VSP, about 1 out of 4 times, we will find a second plan. And then you'll have the opportunity to file more benefits for a second pair of glasses or contacts or sunglasses or whatever the case is. And that's something that we're thrilled to be able to see, and we see it all the time. When we first launched it, we thought, well, use it when the patient doesn't know. But what we found really quickly is use it on every single patient, in network or out. Any questions you guys have about universal search, please feel free to ask. I think I covered kind of the basics, but the gist of it is first name, last name, date of birth. We will search every vision plan all at once and let you know what those benefits are. And what's cool is if your practice is set up in network with, let's say, VSP and IMED, but out of network with the rest, we will search VSP and IMED in network and the rest out of network. Natalie, the universal search is about $100 a month. Beth has a question. What is the best way to do this? In our mission, we don't accept vision insurance, and let us tell you why. Beth, yes, $100 unlimited use, as many patients as you want. We have added more plans for Universal Search recently, but it's slow to get all that up. The major ones that are already in there, VSP, IMED, Davis, Superior, Spectera, they cover about 85 to 90% of vision plans today, but we are always looking to add. It's just a matter of priority. We're still a small company. The more you guys raise your voices and ask us to add stuff, the easier it'll be for us to justify doing that. Beth, the question, does it show in and out of network bennies? I love that. It'll show whichever setup your individual practice has. So if you're in network with VSP, it'll show in network benefits for VSP. And if you're out of network with IMED, it'll show out of network for IMED. It'll keep it aligned with the way your practice is credentialed. When doing universal search, you need first name, last name, and date of birth. That's it. And we will also find dependent patients. And actually it'll go the other way too. If you are searching using the dependent's name, the spouse name, we'll find the primary and their other dependents as well. I think, Beth, that's something that we've discussed, being able to show both the in and out of network benefits at the same time. There are a couple of reasons why that's difficult to do, but it is something that we've discussed. Beth, a little bit ago, you had asked what's the best way to have this conversation. And what I found is, depending on kind of where in the process the conversation happens, you want to be obviously confident and understanding of what we're talking about. But if a patient says something like, I have Davis vision, do you accept it? You don't want to say no. Right. Now, I'm not suggesting you mislead the patient. What I'm suggesting instead is, instead of giving a harsh yes or no answer, you follow up with a different question to help move the conversation along. So if the patient says, I have Davis vision, do you accept it? When you've got Anagram as part of your arsenal, you can say, if you just give me a few pieces of information, first name, last name, and date of birth, I can let you know what your benefits are here. You pop that information into the system and it'll come back with the benefits. And you can say, cool, I was able to find your benefits. You've got Davis. You're entitled to about $40 reimbursement for your eye exam, $60 for your frames, and up to $100 for your lenses. My doctor's got an appointment available on Thursday at 1 p.m. Can you make it? And the difference between that and saying no is that the patient on the other end of the phone has heard that you know how to work with their benefits. You can find it, you can do it for them, and they have a path forward to book with you. If instead the patient says, do you have this plan? And you say no, that's over. The conversation's over. Patient's unhappy. They've got to call somebody else, and you're unhappy because you missed out on a cash pay patient that wants to come to you. If anyone millennial and younger calls your practice, they're basically saying, I would like to give you some money, please. Because millennials don't love calling to set anything up. They don't like making those phone calls, and certainly younger. If we're making a phone call, we want it to be the last phone call we're making. So make it easy to accept that business and practice it, train on it. We've got, like I said, we've got resources that we've purpose built for this, and we've got training teams who are ready to help you do this. Do you offer any Vision Source discounts? We do not. If you go to our website, it is goanagram.com. There is a pricing page. On that pricing page, it will lay out all of the various options. There is entry access, which will search for in network only. And then there's open access, which will do in and out of network. And then there's universal search. And there's also RCM. The pricing page has everything set out, and you can look at it and check in. If you've got multiple locations, we've got a multiple location calculator right there. The best thing I think you guys can do if you're interested is book a time to talk with one of our sales folks. Sal and Riley are in the chat right now. They can answer your questions. They can give you a demo. You can see what it looks like. You can see how it works and see if it makes sense for you. One thing that I'm really proud of as part of this team, nobody on the sales team will sell it to you if it's not a good fit for your practice. And that's part of the conversation. So book that meeting, have that conversation. We've got thousands of customers, Beth. In a quick review of the survey that we've done, who started the company? Our current CEO, Jeremy Bluval, is co-founder. He actually built the initial bits of software, and he's still with us. He's still running the show and is so driven to provide the kind of service that we do so that we can make healthcare better. This is actually motivated by making life better for patients and the people who serve them. He's an engineer. He went to school and grew up in Canada and came to the States working in Silicon Valley and then ran into exactly this problem. He couldn't find a place to use his benefits. He couldn't find how to access his out-of-network benefits, so he built software to do it. When Anagram first started as Patch, it started with him on the floor with a MacBook printing paper forms and mailing them in, and then eventually building software to do that for us. Question from Nicole. When it states up to $55 for lenses, how accurate is that for patient reimbursement? Does the reimbursement get mailed to the patient? It is a direct reflection of the database that we have. So it is as accurate as their database, as the individual vision plans database is. It's also important to note we put up to $55 because the actual reimbursement is predicated on the usual and customary fees that you enter in the form. So if your usual and customary fee for lenses is $60 and there's a $20 copay, the up to $55 will actually end up being a little bit less than that because your usual and customary fees are so low. Generally speaking, we don't run into that as a problem, but it's important to know. Most practices, usual and customary fees far exceed the reimbursement, and the patient will get it. Our software is also tied into Google Maps. So when you put the patient's address in, we verify that the address is real so that the checks don't get lost. Would you say most of your clients are in network or out of network with insurance? Most of our software customers are out of network with at least one major insurance. What's interesting to see is the longer they work with us, the more plans they're out of network with over time. Usually they do end up dropping more and more. The thing is that's super important about this is having this conversation as I'm doing it here is easy, right? It's easy to hypothetically say with a hypothetical patient, hey, let me book you as an out-of-network patient. The truth is your team has to get good at it. Like anything else, when you're first selling the anti-reflective coating or multiple pairs of glasses or polarized lenses or whatever, your team's not as good at it as they will be once they've got some expertise under their belt, once they've got some practice. So if you're out of network with just Spectera or just Davis or just, whatever, one of those plans, start practicing on that one and get good at converting those patients. And then when you're able to do that at a successful clip, then drop the next one up because the skill is the same. The practice is the same. It's just a different plan with slightly different benefits, but all that's right in front of you all the time. Okay, other question. How long until patient receives reimbursement? It's typically 2 to 4 weeks after the claim is submitted. It's around 2 to 4 weeks. Sometimes it's faster and usually tops out at about 4 weeks, but pretty quick. And usually patients really excited to receive it. If a practice chooses provider reimbursement instead of patient, is the reimbursement payment made via paper check or ACH? So, Jenna, this is an important question. Only VSP will allow you to do assignment of benefit so that you receive the payment instead of the patient as an out-of-network provider. But if you're doing it with VSP and you accept assignment of benefits, you will receive a paper check. That's a really important note. If you're busy, we've got practices that see hundreds of VSP patients out of network every month. So they get hundreds of checks every month. Not saying one way or the other whether you should do it that way, but I would rather it went to the patient. So I wouldn't have to reconcile checks or write things off in my system or anything like that. I would just let the reimbursement go to the check. When we put the patient's email address at the end of the claim, do they receive the email confirming we have filed the claim? And does Anagram send an email to the client when the check is being mailed? So when you put the email address after you file the claim, the patient receives a copy of all the information, so the products and the prices and the expected reimbursements. We do not send an email when the check is mailed because we don't know. It is a manual paper process, but we know the typical time frame. And if an issue should ever arise where a patient says they didn't receive their check, we have chat support that is open all day that will then go in and do the work of tracking this down, verifying that the check is on the way, or resubmitting in case it isn't. So we've got that process on lock. Better us doing that than you. Why are some VSP plans not attached to Anagram? It's something actually, if there are new plans that are added that we don't have access to, call attention to that plan in particular with our support team. Our support team then go through, verify, and add them to our database after the fact. Sometimes things get added in a way that we can't notice. Like we don't get notified when VSP makes changes. So it's through partnership with our users that we get better and better at this. So yeah, call attention to this with our chat support and we'll fix it for next time. Thanks, Cindy. Do you have clients like Walmart or large corporate chains? We have regional partners that are in the 50 to 150 locations, but none of the big guys. Okay. Well, in our practice, we do all the paperwork for out of network so the patient can get their money back, which is great. I think that's a good service. If you don't have a super high volume and there's enough time in the day for you to do that and you're happy doing that, keep doing it. What Anagram would let you do, though, is make sure you know what their out of network eligibility is and file the claim digitally. So you don't have to fill out paperwork. You don't have to mail anything in. You don't have to attach receipts, none of that stuff. Our software will take care of all of that for you. We have a remote worker answer the phone. How do you train a new employee on this platform? We've got an onboarding. So when you sign up, we have a customer success agent who becomes your account manager, who will then train your team on how to use it. One of the best things about the software is it's so simple to use. Sal will tell you 100 times that the software is the easiest part of the demo. It's making sure that the team understands how to implement it. But really, when you're using the software, it is just first name, last name, date of birth. You identify the benefits, and then you enter whether they had an exam, whether they got frames, whether they got lenses, and the retail prices for all of them, the patient's address, and then you hit submit. It's super simple. Somebody who's been working with Anagram for any length of time should be able to take a fresh patient, put them into Anagram, and file a claim in less than 5 minutes. And it gets faster from there. I think what's interesting here is of the people that answered the question, it looks like everyone wants to drop or never accepted Spectera or Superior or Davis. Lots of people want to drop iMed. Lots of people want to drop VSP, but definitely fewer people want to drop VSP than the rest of them. It's always really interesting to see. All right. Wow, can you guys believe it's been 50 minutes already? Crazy. All right, Dr. Fenimore says, by charging our usual and customary fee, even if we offer patients a one-time courtesy discount between 15 to 20% to keep their business, we would still make more profit than we would taking A, the meager upfront exam fee, B, the frame coverage and frame slash lens overages and chargebacks, and C, the quote, generous dispensing fees. Yeah, absolutely right. If you break down the cost of this, and this is a conversation that I've had a couple of times as well, a lot of industry experts will say, think about these as like a marketing expense. Probably say, yeah, that sounds awesome. How much is it going to cost? And then the marketing company said, it'll just be 60% of your revenue. You would rightly laugh them out of your practice because you would never pay 60% of your revenue for them to drive business. Now, it's a little different than a marketing thing for a couple of reasons, but if you're able to gradually build up, right, from the bottom, from your lowest population vision plan to your greatest, your team is able to capture more and more patients on a private pay basis. This point you made, Dr. Fenimore, really important, right? The reimbursements are low, the chargebacks are high, the dispensing fees are non-existent, and all of that stuff. But they also limit the kind of quality of service that you can provide. They make everything take longer than it should and be harder to explain than it should. There's a challenge associated with that. But if you're able to get good at it, you can leverage that and build a private pay business more and more. Important to note that your average private pay patient generates 3 times the revenue of an in-network patient every time they come in. Not to mention, they're more loyal, they come in more regularly, and they are more likely to promote you to their friends and family. Well, the difficulty is finding those patients. But if you're able to build a specialty, if you're able to market yourself as somebody who's in the community, who wants to serve the community, if you're able to build out that private pay business, then you don't have to be as busy to remain profitable. And you can start to make some better decisions about hiring or pricing or your product mix or the specialties that you offer, or even something as simple as your hours. So many docs I know work 6, 7 days a week and 10-hour days, and that is a recipe for burnout sooner rather than later. But if you're able to see half as many patients over that same period of time, your life is a lot easier. Your team's going to be happier. There's a lot to be said for that. A couple more questions here. Yes, absolutely, Beth. We have to remember the party at fault here is the insurance company, not the patient. Absolutely. I think it's important for us to be really clear in the communication. We want the patient. We want the opportunity to take care of the patient. The issue that I see so often is the vision plan is a barrier between the practice and the patient. It's a barrier between the service they deserve and the service that they get. So the more barriers we can remove, the better. Dr. Fenimore says, I hate offering these patients a discount when those that have been private pay for years have probably never gotten a discount. That's an absolutely fair sentiment. Think about it as an investment in retaining them. You don't have to give them a discount forever, but maybe that one time to win them over from having been in network to now being open access. The thing that we got to keep in mind is that that one-time discount or maybe two-time discount will win you a lifetime patient on your terms. What is that worth to you? One, do you see a lot of vision plans that do not have an out-of-network benefit? Sarah, it is pretty regional. Generally speaking, the national ones, VSP and IMED and their like flagship products. So both VSP and IMED have some like discount plans that don't have out of network benefits because they don't really have in network benefits either. They're not funded, they're just a discount. So those aren't going to have out of network benefits, but your standard choice and signature plans from VSP and the bigger ones from IMED will have out of network benefits. There are some cases where regionally Spectera may or may not have in network benefits, but it's all stuff we can find and all stuff we know ahead of time, and we can let you know what to expect. And that's like the biggest element of this is just having the knowledge and the confidence to move forward. Without Anagram, and I don't like positioning it this way because genuinely you can think about this without Anagram, but When you don't have Anagram, you're guessing at so much that it becomes more difficult to do it. But with Anagram, you've got a bunch of tools, you've got a bunch of information, you've got an easy way to submit the claims that you can have the confidence to do this the right way and in a way that you know your patients will benefit too. And I think that's super important. I'm really grateful that I get to have these kinds of conversations. Listen, look at the conversation we've had today. All you eye care professionals, you want to take care of your patients. And I want to help you do that in a way that keeps you successful. And that's what we're built to do. So I can't thank you enough for the questions that you've asked. And I certainly can't thank you enough for doing what you do every day. Do some offices lower their usual customer fees when going completely out of network? I think that's probably the right move because it makes it easier to capture more patients and stay profitable. Like in a lot of cases, when your usual and customary fees are what they are, they're a response to maximizing reimbursement. They don't necessarily need to be what they are if you're actually receiving those fees from the patient. I think what's important is as like an overarching concept is think about why your prices are your prices, right? So think about just in like a standard eye exam. If you go to Costco OD, and it's not a shot at them, but Costco ODs, their eye exams are still $80 or something today. But you go to a private practice OD and they typically start at 150. Go to a private practice ophthalmologist and their standard exam starts at $300. Now, is there a material difference between those exams? Maybe, but patients don't know that. And most practices have a hard time articulating that. But if you're able to say, our exam is $200 because as part of our exam, you get this litany of tests, you get these diagnostic tests, we do Optomap or retinal images of some kind, and we do a visual field, we do a full holistic systemic workup on you, and that's why it's $200. If you're able to convey that value to the patient, then you're going to capture them. If you continue doing like a standard eye exam that they could get elsewhere in network for $10, you're probably going to have a harder time capturing them. And I say it that way to hopefully help you think about how do I build my pricing such that I capture more patients. And it has to do with being able to articulate why your prices are your prices. Exactly right, Dr. Fenimore. We need to list the things we do, and we need to tell them why our exam fee is what it is. Gosh, we're running up on the top of the hour. Any final questions before we wrap up for the evening? Sal from Anagram just posted, the metrics tell all. I've seen practices drop plans where the cost of the patient is less than in network and the practice makes 2 to 6 times more after they drop certain plans. Thank you, Dr. Fenimore. I appreciate all your questions and insights in the history that you've seen go through this. How do I schedule an appointment to get more info? Excellent question. I'm going to send a link in the chat. Goanagram.com/get started, I believe. Yeah. So if anybody who's interested in booking a demo, click that link and then click request a demo. That's the bright orange button on the screen. Put in your first name and last name and email address, and then somebody on Team Anagram will reach out to you. If you fill that out, it'll send an email to us so we can book an appointment. But if you just follow up, there is a way for you to book your own appointment right then. Excellent. We're excited to have you on board, Dr. Fenimore, if it works out. Okay. And with that, I think we'll call it an event. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all the questions. I will send the recording out when it's processed. Zoom takes a little bit to process and record everything, but I will send it out and I'll probably edit out all the ums and uhs and stutters and so forth. But thank you, everybody, for being here. Have a great rest of your evening. We look forward to having you on Team Anagram.